Hello and welcome back. So this is another video about Git and Git tools. If you can't tell by the title or the thumbnail, we're going to be talking about forking today. So we're gonna talk briefly about kind of what forking is. We're going to go through how we actually fork a repository and why we might fork a repository. And then at the end, I've created a repository. And you can go through and fork it yourself and see how the process works. So first and foremost, what is forking a repository, right? So in order to answer that question better, let's look at why we might need to fork a repository. So I'm going to show you guys a quick example. It's a basic example, but it illustrates why we might want to fork. So let's say I notice in this repository, I'm like, oh, I love this repository, right? It's cool. It's about forking a repository. And, let's say I notice there's something wrong, or I could add something to it, right? And so I want to do that. So, what we know to do so far is that we can clone this repository by copying it, the SSH address, right? We can come into our terminal and using the git clone command, we can go ahead and clone this repository onto our local machine. And then we can make some changes. So let's do that. So we cloned into the repository, and you can see if we ls, yep, there it is, get good forking. So we're going to go ahead and cd into that repository, local repository, and we can tell with the ls, let me just clear my screen here. We can tell with the lsal command that this is indeed a repository. And again, classic. We can get status. We see that we're in a repository, we're on branch main, and we're up to date. So this is stuff we talked about in yesterday's video. I'll provide a link to that in the description. So what if I want to make a change, right? So I notice actually they're missing something. So I go ahead and I add, missing feature.py, right? Awesome. And I do my get status and I check to see it and it's untracked. Okay, so we know that we need to stage this file, right? So we're going to go ahead and do that. We can use the git add and we're going to say missing feature.py. Okay. Now when we do get status, we can say, okay, so this is a change that is to be committed, but it is not yet committed. Okay, so now that we've added that feature, we can go ahead and commit it. We're just going to use the message git commit, added a missing feature, you're welcome. Go ahead and do that. We can see that the commit's been made. When we get status, we can see that indeed there's no changes. Everything's an unmodified right now. And so we cloned the remote repository onto our local machine. We added something to it. We staged those changes, and then we committed them to the Git history. So as we know from yesterday, that doesn't mean that this repository has changed, the remote. It's the same, in fact. There's nothing new. But we already knew that from yesterday. So I'm going to show you a command. Now, we're not going to go in depth into that today. That's going to be for tomorrow, where we're going to start to talk about, push and pull. But for right now, just know that there is this command that will let you push the changes you've made to the remote repository to help sync those two together. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And when I do that, whoa, what's happening here, right? I get this permission to Chris Alexia get good forking get denied to CSAL fatal, could not read. Please make sure you have the correct access rights. So what's going on there, right? So we don't have to worry about push for now, but just know that we can't do it, right? And why is that? Well, it's because I am not in GitHub or in the Git tool. I am not this user, right? I'm CSAL. So I can't actually contribute anything to this particular repository. So there's no way for me to make changes to someone else's code without their express permission, right? I'm definitely not allowed to do that. So this is where forking comes in. This is the problem that forking solves, right? So I can't just add stuff to someone's project without them letting me do that by giving me permission, adding me as a collaborator, or as we'll see, through a process called forking. So for now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to CD above, and I'm going to remove the local repository. I'm just going to get rid of it. We don't need it, right? We can't push it. So for now, we're good to just get rid of it. I'll go ahead and clear my screen here. And so yes. So what can we do? Well, this is where forking comes in. So I have my other account, my other GitHub account pulled up here, and I'm on this same repository. So this is my Chirs GitHub account, and this is my CSAIL GitHub account, right? So from my CSAIL account, you'll notice that I have this button in the top right here called fork. I have it as well in this account, but if I click it, I own that repository, so it won't do anything, unfortunately. But if I click this fork button on the repository in my other account, you can see I have this option to create a new fork. And that is where, kind of like the power of this comes in. So essentially what forking is going to do is it's going to create a copy of that repository, but under my account, right? So it's going to copy all of the information, whatever the history is, all of the files and the code that's there, and it's going to make that into my repository. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You'll notice that we can change some fields here. So we can change the repository name. We can, change the description. So I'm going to say a forked repository that explains how to fork it. And we can choose to either only copy main or copy as much as we want, depending on what we'd like. But for now, we're just going to leave all the defaults in because it's quick enough. So go ahead and hit create fork. And we watch the dancing wheel dance for a minute and just wait to see what happens, right? And boom, it's done. Now we have that repository. And it's under our account, so CSAIL, as opposed to under this Get Good forking or the Chirs account. So it also has this line, forked from Chirs. And if we refresh here, in this repository, you can see that we can view all existing forks. So we can tell that people have forked our repository, right? And this is an important piece of technology because it helps us understand who we're collaborating with, who's finding our code to be valuable, all of these other things. So it's an incredible tool. And we're going to get into why forking is such a powerful tool in a little bit. But for now, we're just happy that we've got this repository on our account. And so what does that mean? Practically, it means if we go back to our command line and let's say we want to git clone, git at github.com, and we know that our account has it now, so we can say git good forking for CSAIL. That's the account that this terminal is associated with. We can go and clone that, and that's lovely. And we can go ahead and CD into that newly created repository. And again, we can go ahead and check that it is what it says it is. We can look for that .git folder or directory that means this is a actual repository. And let's say now I wanted to add that missing feature. So I just go ahead and create that. We check our git status. Again, we find that that feature is untracked. So we are going to go ahead and add that untracked file. Again, using git status, we can see indeed that it is now tracked and it's ready to be committed. So we can go ahead and commit that using the line added a missing feature, right? And go ahead and commit that. We see it commits fine, and we go back and we see that there are no untracked or modified files. So our working tree is clean, but we are one commit ahead of the remote repository. Going to go ahead and clear the screen here. And now we can use that push command, which again, I'm just glossing over for right now, but basically what it's doing is sending our changes to this remote repository. I can push that, and it happens. It works. We don't get a permission error. And if we look at the fork, our fork of this repository, we can see indeed that missing feature is added. Incredible tool, forking, right? It's like one of the most powerful collaboration enablers because it helps you to work on a repository you don't own and make changes to it. Like, let's say you have an open source project that you just love, but you want to be able to modify it a little bit, right? With this forking process, you're able to do that. And then you can also suggest those changes back to the person who owns the original repository and see if they like those changes, they can actually take them on. So it's a very powerful tool. One last thing I wanted to look at before we actually, end this particular video is we also have the ability to sync our fork. Now, what that means is that, like, let's say I fork this repository and then 2 days later, the owner of this repository goes ahead and they add a file. They just add, let's call it cool new feature.py. And, it's cool. And, they're not create new cool feature.py, right? They just create one. And we're like, oh, man, we really want that feature. And that feature doesn't conflict with anything we've done. But, do we have to refork it and then redo all the work we've done? And because we added this missing feature, remember, right? Like, so our repository has something the original did not. Do we have to recreate, refork and then change our, drag and drop our changes over or some weird situation like that? Absolutely not. GitHub's given us a tool called Sync Fork in which we can update a branch. So if we click on this update branch button, you will see that we update to the original repository without discarding our changes. You'll notice that there was the option to discard our changes, so you can totally do that if you want. But we chose not to in this case. So again, it's absolutely an amazing tool. Forking is one of the all-time, fan favorite features of something like GitHub because it allows us to collaborate in a really meaningful and exciting way. We're going to get more into how we collaborate and what tools we use to do that. But for right now, just wanted to talk about how do you even fork a repository. So again, I have created this repository. So that's at Chris Alexiak, Get Good Forking. The link will be in the description. It walks you through in text with some pictures how you can do that. So if you wanted to try your hand at forking a repository, you're more than welcome to practice here. Practice with any repository you like and you think you can make updates and changes to, right? The more we all know how to interface with open source, the better we can make projects. So again, this is not specific to Git. This is a very GitHub specific operation, but it's still incredibly useful and, one of the greatest. So thank you very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and we will see you tomorrow where we're going to talk more about, okay, so now we're making changes, right? How do we get those changes to appear on our remote repositories? And so we're going to talk about that process tomorrow. Okay, thank you so much for your time.